Hi, I'm Sam Corkeys from EVSE Australia, and I'm here today joined by Alan Magaris from Intrax Consulting Engineers to talk about the NCC. And of course, they released the regulations in 2022, and they're now in the consulting phase for 2025. And so we really wanted to make this video to give developers and builders a strong understanding of what the current regulations are, a little bit of a guide to where 2025 is, and really help them understand what the minimum standards are for kind of going about and ensuring that their development complies with the latest regulations. And of course, we're going to have a focus on EV charging because it is a hot topic. Every development needs to have some charging infrastructure now. So, Alan, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Sam, and thank you for having me. It's always great to talk a little bit about, I guess, what we do and what we're contributing to in a very evolving industry. So a little bit about myself. My name is Alan Magaris. I'm from Intrax Consulting Engineers. I myself have been in the industry now for about 20 years. 10 of those, in fact, with a tool belt. So I was a practicing electrician. I'm no longer a practicing electrician. Thought I would trade pliers for highlighters. I'm a chartered engineer by trade, and I do also have accreditation as a design practitioner under the Building Commission for Electrical and Dry Fire Systems.
Yeah. So you're pretty well kind of versed in everything, especially because you've been on the tools and as an engineer. I think you kind of have an experience that no one else almost in the industry can kind of match.
Yeah, very rare.
So what I would love to ask is, have you ever been kind of involved in kind of a development where the regulations have changed and kind of there've been cost blowouts or failure to meet the NCC?
Yeah, so with NCC 2022, in fact, because of the changes that were so aggressive for the market, a lot of developers were sort of toiled between submitting a CC application before the 1st of May last year, was when the 2022 NCC mandate happened, or doing it after the fact and actually, preparing for the inevitable EV charger uptake. So we have seen obviously a few developers that have had some pretty significant cost blowouts, but not so much that it would obviously stop development, but something that obviously was quite significant and had some reshaping in the building model to look into.
Absolutely. And considering we've got 2022, which was mandated, as you said, in that May period, what are some of the changes that are going to be different from 2025?
So at the moment, the 2025 rendition of the National Construction Code is going through a bit of a draft process. So it has been issued to the industry for comment and opinion. And I guess from an EV perspective, while they are draft, in fact, so take this with a grain of salt as you will. The EV changes that are being questioned at the moment are, cables now going to be within 50 meters from each EV distribution board, which is actually now considered a mandate. They're actually considering using bus duct systems as well as complement to traditional cable tray, sub-main, EV-DB type scenario, which is really good from a three-phase perspective. And now, moving forward from what's already prevalent in provisions for electric vehicle charging stations, now they're looking at actual minimum installation requirements for EV charging stations across, your class 2 to class 9 developments. So they're ever increasing. So previously you'd think just provisions of electric vehicle charging stations. Now we're talking about partial installation of EV charging stations.
Which makes sense, right? Like if you're provisioning for something, it'd be good to actually have a few EV chargers in, because we know 10% of every new car being sold in Australia right now and increasing in future will be an EV. So your development should have something. So it also looks like these are really friendly towards apartment owners when they go about buying an EV charger or retrofitting after the fact, like within 50 meters kind of, and ensuring the costs are really kind of pretty sharp there.
Yeah.
What about brownfield sites? Because we get asked, hey, do I have to comply with NCC? And we're sort of at a bit of a loss. So we'd love to understand from your perspective.
Yeah, so NCC 2022, or in fact any other National Construction Code compliance, comes into effect when you're submitting either a development application as part of construction certificate process, or you're submitting for a compliant development certificate. So if those two apply because the EPA regulations come into effect, that's when your 2022 compliance will then need to be mandated.
Oh, fantastic. So Alan, do we need to install an EV charger in every single bay? What are the minimum requirements? The market, the industry needs to know, right? And I know there's some tables, so can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so as of date of this recording, we're in NCC 2022. The requirement at the moment is provision for electric vehicle charging stations. Where it becomes an actual requirement from an installation perspective is the NCC requires that you have distribution boards installed across your car parks to make allowance for provision of future electric vehicle charging stations. So there is a specific table in the NCC called Table J9D4, which talks about how many distribution boards per story that you require for your car parks. So anything less than 10 car park spaces, you don't need electric vehicle distribution boards. Where it gets more interesting is that from 24 and every 24 car spaces after that, you add one electric vehicle distribution board per story in your car park. So by a formula perspective, if you were to take the amount of car spaces per story, divide that by 24, round that up to the nearest one, get a whole number, that's how many distribution boards you're going to require per story.
Oh, wow. And what about substations? Because we get asked this all the time, and I understand this question. Like if I'm a developer or a builder, substations are very expensive. Do you need a substation to install EV chargers, or do you need to do major upgrades? Where do we stand?
Okay. Look, it's a very complicated question to answer really, because the requirement from EV chargers to operate at the optimal capacity does require a lot of power. We're all very cognizant of that in the industry. Now, the most prevalent technology that's available to counteract that is load management systems, which we've thought about, time and time again. Now, to answer your question, I guess from a requirement from a utility perspective, well, if I were to give you the example that you had, say, 1,000 amps at a site, and you do some load profiling, you determine that you only have 200 amps of spare capacity from this service. If I needed 4, maybe 5 Type 2 7 to 11 kilowatt charging stations, I could get optimal output from those at 100% pace of charge based on the type of vehicle that's actually getting connected to it.
Yep.
Happy days, right?
Happy.
Where it gets a little bit more complicated is when that requirement then either doubles or triples in quantum of electric vehicle charges.
Yep.
Then all of a sudden I can't run that at optimal capacity, because then I overload the service and I will effectively trip the entire main switchboard.
Yep.
So the load management system then comes into play and provides regulated power to each of these EV charging stations. They're going to be, I guess, pre-programmed, via companies such as EVSE, to help regulate that load and keep within those confines so that you don't have that overload experience. You don't have that risk of a main switchboard shutdown.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got some pretty advanced technology thanks to what we've done, obviously, with the CSIRO, and kind of looking at what in Australia, we've had kind of the requirement to already do 30, 40, 50 EV chargers in a building, and so we've been able to do that. So either through digital circuits where you kind of assign a load across your EV chargers, or kind of through what I call an offline system, which is kind of Cat6 cables to every charger using CT clamps to monitor the board's load in real
Exactly.
time. So that technology is available, guys, and it's really, really important when you're working through your NCC to take that into account. And Alan here is well versed at ensuring that you can get that really cost effectively, as well as the team at EVSE. So now that we're talking load control, pace of charge of EVs, right? Like I get these calls, Sam, we want DC chargers in every bay, and I'm like, that's not possible. We're not trying to do petrol stations in every car bay. What we're trying to do is have chargers in every bay that can actually overnight, or every time you come home and you're 70%, you're 60%, you plug in and you top up. Think of your mobile phone, right? It doesn't have to be at 0 to charge. So what are the pace of charges, right?
So look, I'll leave that to you to talk about, I guess, the technology behind each of the vehicles and their pace of charge. But from a compliance perspective, the minimum requirement in the National Construction Code is 7 kilowatts or 32 amps.
Exactly right. So like your Tesla at AC, and I always say most NCC compliant developments are going to be AC charging. So you're looking at a 3-phase 16 amps per charger, or if you do single phase, a 32 amp single phase. And then of course the load management technology will balance that load automatically, so that the driver will just get the maximum load available, and that will increase or decrease as the amount of people within the building plug in. Because you put these chargers in at 100% of the car spaces, but those chargers won't be used 100% of the time by 100% of the drivers. And that's the real key here, to get that right.
So if I can throw you off guard here, I'd like to actually ask you a question then. So you've obviously been in the EV industry for quite a number of years. If I have a Nissan Leaf, because I'm quite climate conscious and I'm really interested in EVs, and I've got a friend of mine who's got a Tesla Model 3. There's a 22 kilowatt AC 3-phase charging station available just outside the EVSE offices.
Absolutely.
Do they charge at the same rate?
With AC charging, no. It's really dependent on the vehicle. So that Nissan Leaf is going to charge at a single phase 32 amp, and the Tesla will charge at the 3-phase 16 amp, so 11 kilowatts of power. But in saying that, the charger will automatically regulate that, and the load control system will automatically regulate that. So just make the charger available, and the vehicle and the software will take care of the rest.
That's a really important note to raise, because at the end of the day, when you are working with your clients, you want to connect with what exactly their community is after. If you look by geographical sense, some people in the eastern suburbs might have a preference towards Teslas because they enjoy that type of vehicle, or people outside of the CBD might prefer something that's a lot more viable from a financial standpoint.
Correct.
So different types of vehicles have different types of paces of charge. So it's not always going the absolute greatest asset you can put on an EV charging station, but rather what is suitable to your client at that given point in time.
Exactly right. And a lot of people also talk about, and you mentioned financially, how do you actually go about reimbursing for the electricity consumed? Because, it's not really fair to ask the entire building to pay for 3 or 4 EV drivers' electricity consumption. And thankfully, there are answers and there are solutions. Like, I know ourselves, we're putting a lot of software on chargers. So the majority of brands in the market are OCPP compliant. We then put our Explorer software, and we can individually meter every single charger and charge that end user in real time, as opposed to having everyone to pay. And I know there's also kind of builders who are looking kind of to connect directly to individual meters, which isn't always possible.
Not always.
Always, because you've got long runs, level 30, you can't kind of run a cable down to basement 3. But there's also new solutions coming out that we're developing, which will kind of tie into meters as well, which will really be strong. So you've already mentioned it, but it's just so everyone knows, EV chargers are compatible with every EV, especially the ones we supply. So Alan, we always get asked about PowerPoints, and if a developer can just install a PowerPoint instead of an EV charger. Please give us some clarity.
Okay, look, the short answer is that by compliance in NCC, you need to have minimum 7 kilowatts, 32 amps available at the charging port. Now, you can have something less, but it becomes less viable from a commercial sense. So I'm not going to bother telling you about trickle charge, because it is really not a viable solution in the developer market. So think of it as 7 kilowatts, 32 amps.
Yeah, and I think it also requires smart charging and the ability to kind of really build the end user. The PowerPoints are just not going to meet NCC requirements. And so we were talking about load. So what is the lowest load an EV charger can run at?
So depending on the class of development that varies in the NCC, you're going to get between 12 to 48 kilowatt hours based on time of use operation. So go through your NCC compliance. We're happy, of course, to help you out with that. But it does typically vary depending on those classifications.
Yeah, so just consult part J9D4 and the answer will be there. Or consult this man or EVSE and we'll make sure you get it all right.
Happy to help.
So what about fire? Because I know you need to have some considerations there.
Yeah, so the topic of fire has evolved over the last few years. I'm not going to bore you with the details just for now, but at the end of the day, EVs are considered a special hazard in the National Construction Code. So what that effectively means is not one solution is going to work as a copy paste, as a carbon copy on the next development. So you got to reach out to people like Intrax, and we're absolutely happy to help you out with that. Go through what those metrics are and identify what the best solution is for your development.
Yeah, work with your fire engineers. But the good news is we're kind of really establishing a precedent, especially around sprinklers and so forth. So it is very viable to put EV chargers in a development. Alan, honestly, on behalf of the EVSE team, and I think everyone watching, we really appreciate your insights, your knowledge. And I think anyone looking for advice around NCC compliance, I think it'd be great to reach out to yourself and get some more information.
No, I appreciate the time, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Have a good one.
See ya.